In this video, let's learn about variables. A variable is a virtual container where we can store different kind of data, and for instance, numbers or colors and a lot of other things that we will learn in the future. So let's start with storing a number to a variable. And there are different places that we can define a variable, and we can define it within the setup function, meaning between the two curly braces of the setup function, or within the draw function between the two curly braces within the draw function, or we can define a variable outside these, which are called the global scope. What that means is any variable that we create here is going to be accessible at everywhere in our, loosely speaking, it's everywhere in our sketch. And in this case, I'm going to do that. So let x equals to 200. Let y equals to 200. So this is the syntax we use. Let a variable's name equal to the value that we want to assign to that variable, and let y equal to 200, assign 200 to y. So we are using y as a container to store this information, to store the status, this number. And then let d equals to also 200 for now. So d stands for the diameter in this case, and we're going to stand for diameter in this case. So now in the draw function, we can draw the same circle that we drew before, but with variables. So x, y, and d. And d, so the last number for a circle, that is the diameter of the circle. And then we can change the position or the size of the circle by changing the numbers on the very top. Super tiny. Change it to 100. I'm going to change it back to 200, so it's at the center. And so this is helpful for a few reasons. One, this is the same way if you write the numbers directly within the circle function. However, this helps us helps us to read. Let me actually save this. This will help us read. So I know that the x, y, and d, they each represent the coordinate and then the diameter. So it might seem obvious for a simple sketch like this. However, once you have a very complicated sketch with a ton of different values, it's really helpful if they have names so that we can simply use them by names instead of using the numbers directly. And it's also helpful if we use these numbers in multiple instances. So for instance, if I want to draw the rectangle that we drew before, x, y, so this is a rectangle mode, center, and draw the rectangle, x, y. I can then use, maybe in this case, 100 and 100 for now. So if I want to draw a square at the same position, or maybe just make this smaller so you can see both of them smaller. And then we see that rectangle this way. We can simply, if we want to move both of them, we can simply change the x and y on the very top, and then we affect the entire sketch. But of course, for the rectangle, we might also want to create the width and the height. So I'll change this to W and change 50 to H. So now maybe again I'll make this smaller. So I'm actually not setting a very good example here. It's usually not recommended to use a single letter as a variable name because it's going to repeat once you, again, if you have a lot of variables, there's only there's really not that many letters in the English alphabet. And so it will be hard to decode, to understand what these letters mean once you have a lot of them. So for a simple sketch like this, maybe it's okay, especially for this demonstration, maybe it's okay that we're using x, y, d, w, h. but usually it's ideal if we have more descriptive names. For instance, instead of D, you can put diameter. Again, they don't have to be the single letter, so we can call it diameter. And then, of course, I need to change this to diameter as well. And that way, it's simply easier to read. And then we have width and height. One thing you might notice is as soon as I type width, this word width becomes pink in the theme that I'm using. That is because width is a reserved keyword, meaning it is a variable that's already used by P5JS. So in this case, we do not want to we want to avoid this kind of conflict. We do not want to use that. So what we can do is maybe call it like rect width and rect height. And now instead of W and H, rect width and rect height. Now it's the same thing, but again, this when we're looking at the top of the sketch, we can simply tell what each number represents, and then we can adjust accordingly. So what are the width and height, or the width that we just saw, which changed the color? So that is a special variable, a kind of magic variable that's provided by the p5.js library. What that means is, and specifically, width is going to be the same as the width of the canvas, and height is going to be the same as the height of the canvas. So we can then use these two variables to algorithmically decide where we want to draw certain things. Let me give you an example. Let's say if I want to draw another circle right at the center of the canvas. Now, instead of 200, 200, or x and y, what I can do is width divided by 2, height divided by 2, because the width of the canvas is 400, so width divided by 2 is going to be 200. And height of the canvas is 200, so height divided by 2 is going to be 200. And then the diameter, maybe I can use width divided by 4. And that happens to be exactly the same as the current circle, so I'm going to make this even smaller by dividing that by 8. So now we see we have that circle over there. But what's the benefits? You might think that, isn't that the same thing? Why did we use width and height? First of all, I want to show really quickly that under the edit submenu, we have the tidy code. Again, on the Mac, it's Command-Shift-F, and on PC, it's Control-Shift-F. And then I can also save this. This just helps us organize, tidy up the code, which is to format the code in this standard way. So what are we going to do? And is to change the width and height of the canvas. So what if I change the width of the canvas to 200? So now you see the difference. Because the circle that we define in this last line, the 16th line of our code, we used width divided by 2, height divided by 2, and then width divided by 8. So when I change the width of the canvas, that circle automatically change based on the width and height of the canvas. However, the other circle and the rectangle that we drew with the predefined numbers did not change because that's the position we defined. So how do we? So now let's say if I want to draw. So now if we look at the circle, it's kind of hard to read because, again, we are using variables, but then we are doing some math on it. So how can we make this also readable? So one thing we can do is to create variables within the draw loop, because these numbers will only be used within the draw, so we also don't have to put it outside. And actually before that, I would show you that I'm going to call this circle X. So if we want to define it here, let's try it, circle X, and let circle Y equals to height divide by 2. Let's actually try it out. So instead of this, let's say circle x, circle y, and I'm going to use 100 for now. And we'll see that we just saw our very first error message in our console. It says reference error, width is not defined. You might wonder, Jack, didn't you just say that width automatically is the width of the canvas and height is height of the canvas? Yes, I did say that. But remember that this global scope, the thing that happens in the global scope, actually happens before the setup and the draw. So before the setup, which is where we create the canvas, before we do that, we do not even have a canvas. That's why width and height is meaningless at that point. There is no width and no height because canvas is not even created yet. And that is why these two do not work. And in fact, if there's any type of P5 or not any, but for most of the P5 functions or P5 related P5 the kind of variables such as width and height that are provided by P5, we can only use them inside of either setup or draw, or maybe we can also create our own function, but these functions should also only be called within the setup or draw. So how can I do? So then what if I want this to be at the center? So then in that case, what we can do is to define the variables in the global scope, like so. So that's where we create that. And then inside of the setup, we can change the number, circle x, width divided by 2, circle y equals to height divided by 2. And then auto format. So this case, now it worked. Now I use 100 for the size. And this time it worked. There's no error message. That is because this time we are using the width and height after we create the canvas. That's why now it does exist. Now let's just to complete, let's do the circle diameter as well. So circle diameter equals to width divided by any number. So maybe 8, like we did earlier, and change this 100 to circle diameter. Yeah, so we have that tiny circle. So again, let's try this out. If I change this to 600, our circle always stays at the center, but the other shapes do not stay at the center. And let's keep it like this. And I'll change this back to 400 and 400. Yeah. So this is it. This is the basics of variables. We can create variables at the global scope, which will be accessible for both within setup and draw. And then we can use these variables when we are drawing different shapes, and that way it's easy for us to manage, it's easier to read, and a lot of benefits. And thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.